The woman standing in front of him did not look like someone who needed saving. She stood with effortless authority, her posture relaxed yet unmistakably commanding, as if the space itself had learned to yield around her. Dark leather armor traced her form with ceremonial precision, designed not just for protection, but for presence. The material was worn, not pristine, carrying the subtle scars of real combat rather than ornamental battle myths. Her long blonde hair was braided in intricate patterns that spoke of lineage and rank, framing a face that was both strikingly beautiful and unsettlingly composed. But it was her eyes that held him. Gold, not metaphorically, not poetically. Actual luminous gold, focused, intelligent and sharp enough to feel like a physical pressure against his chest. Elia's work had survived war zones, collapsing structures, screaming casualties, and nights where death hovered inches from his hands. He had never felt this exposed. "You are certain?" she asked, her voice calm and perfectly controlled, carrying an unfamiliar resonance that vibrated faintly through the air. "This is the human." The officer beside Elia stiffened. "Yes, Your Majesty. Biometric confirmation is absolute. Former combat medic, retired, no current affiliations." Her gaze never left Elia's as she took a single step closer. Not aggressive, deliberate. "You remember me," she said. It was not phrased as a question. The translator rendered her words into his ear, but it did nothing to soften their weight. Elias felt the past surge forward, smoke, fire, broken concrete, the metallic scent of blood thick enough to taste. "Yes," he answered, his voice steady by habit rather than comfort. "I remember." The courtyard of the Velkaran citadel was silent around them. Towering spires of dark stone curved skyward, etched with symbols older than human spaceflight. Banners stirred in the wind, their sigils marking victories Elias had only read about in declassified briefings long after the war ended. He was acutely aware of how out of place he looked. No uniform, no weapon, no authority. Just a man who had once knelt in the rubble of a ruined city and made a choice. "You saved my life," she said. The words were quiet. They landed anyway. Elias exhaled slowly. "You were bleeding out, multiple fractures, internal damage." "You had minutes." Her expression shifted, not into vulnerability, not into gratitude, recognition. "Many would have walked away," she said. "You did not." "I was a medic," he replied simply. "I didn't see an enemy, I saw a patient." Something flickered behind her eyes then, something restrained, carefully held in check. A truth remembered. She turned, just enough for the watching court to hear her next words. "I am Queen Lysara of the Velkaran Dominion," she announced. "And this human once chose compassion over strategy, principle over survival." A murmur rippled through the assembled nobles, generals, and advisors. Elias felt their attention sharpen, recalibrate. He became something else in that moment. A variable. Lysara faced him again, closing the distance until he could see the faint scars at her collarbone, old, healed, familiar. "Come with me, Elias Rourke," she said quietly. "There is a debt between us." Her gaze held his, unblinking, "And it is time I repaid it." The corridors of the Velkaran citadel were not built to impress. They were built to endure. Elias noticed it immediately as he walked beside Queen Lysara, their footsteps echoing softly against dark stone that seemed less carved than grown. The walls curved organically, veins of faintly glowing crystal pulsing beneath the surface like a living circulatory system. This place was not merely ancient, it was patient. It had outlasted wars, rulers, even entire belief systems. He wondered how long it would outlast him. "You are calmer than most," Lysara said without looking at him. "I've learned that panic wastes time," Elias replied. "In my line of work, calm kept people alive." Her eyes flicked toward him briefly, assessing, always assessing. "You were removed from your farm without explanation," she continued, "brought across interstellar distance, confronted by an imperial court, and yet your heart rate remains controlled." He gave a faint, humorless smile. "It's elevated, just not visibly." That earned him something close to amusement. They entered a private chamber smaller than the throne hall but no less refined. The doors sealed behind them with a soft harmonic tone. No guards followed. No advisors lingered. Privacy. Lysara gestured toward a seating arrangement that adjusted itself subtly to accommodate his human physiology. Elias hesitated for half a second, then sat. She remained standing. "I will be direct," she said. "You were not summoned for ceremony or nostalgia." He nodded. "I assumed as much." "My empire stands at a delicate equilibrium," Lysara continued. "The peace with humanity holds, but it is fragile. There are factions within my court who believe cooperation is weakness, that your species will always choose expansion over coexistence. And on our side," Elias said carefully, "there are those who believe your empire would crush us the moment it became convenient." She inclined her head slightly. "Then you understand the symmetry of distrust." Elias leaned back, exhaling slowly. "I still don't understand what that has to do with me." Lysara stepped closer, stopping just inside his personal space, not enough to threaten, but enough to make her presence undeniable. "You are proof," she said, "that even at the height of war, choice existed." Images shimmered into existence between them, holographic reconstructions. A ruined city, fire, debris, a younger version of Lysara, bloodied and unconscious, and a kneeling human figure himself, hands steady, movements precise. "You defied orders," she said. "Risked capture, risked execution." "I risked nothing I wasn't willing to lose," Elias replied quietly. Her eyes narrowed, not in anger, interest. "You treated me without knowing who I was," she said, "without expectation of reward, without political calculation." He met her gaze. "If I had known, it wouldn't have mattered." Silence stretched between them. Finally, Lysara turned away, her posture tightening, not with tension but resolve. "I intend to make your presence here public," she said. "Your story will be shared, your actions contextualized." Elias frowned. "You're turning me into a symbol." "Yes," she agreed without apology, "because symbols shape belief faster than policy ever could." He stood then, instinctively pacing a step before stopping himself. "I didn't agree to become propaganda." She faced him again, her expression sharp but not cold. "Nor would I ask you to lie." That stopped him. "You will speak honestly," Lysara continued. "About the war, about human failings, about mine. Your value is not perfection, it is authenticity." "And when that authenticity causes problems?" Elias asked, her lips curved faintly. "Then we will address those problems together." He studied her then, not as a queen, not as the wounded officer he once saved, but as a ruler carrying the weight of an empire that could fracture under the wrong pressure. "This will make me enemies," he said. "It already has," she replied calmly. Elias let out a slow breath. "I'm not trained for politics." "No," Lysara said. "You are trained for consequences." Their eyes held. "Stay," she said simply. "Not as a servant, not as a pawn, but as a voice neither side can easily dismiss." The word lingered between them. Stay. For the first time since arriving, Elias felt the true weight of the choice before him. And for reasons he didn't yet fully understand, walking away felt heavier than remaining. Elias learned very quickly that being invited into the heart of an empire did not mean being welcomed. The Velkaran court observed him the way predators observe an unfamiliar presence in their territory, not with immediate aggression, but with focused calculation. Conversations quieted when he passed. Glances lingered just a moment too long. Curiosity mixed with suspicion in ways that made his skin prickle. He had become visible. That alone made him dangerous. The first formal reception was held 3 days after his arrival, long enough for rumors to metastasize, short enough that Lysara's decision still felt abrupt to those who opposed it. Elias stood at her right side as the chamber filled with nobles, military commanders, and diplomatic envoys. He wore tailored attire provided by the court, dark, understated, intentionally neutral. No insignia, no rank markers. A human without a flag. Lysara, by contrast, was impossible to ignore. Her armor this time was ceremonial, deep obsidian metal traced with faint gold filigree that echoed the color of her eyes. The cut was elegant, unapologetic, designed to command attention without requesting it. She did not need to raise her voice for the room to bend around her presence. "This," she said, gesturing subtly toward Elias, "is the human you have heard about." The room stilled. Elias felt hundreds of eyes settle on him at once. "He is the reason I survived Koravel," Lysara continued, "and therefore the reason this empire has the ruler it does today." The words were deliberate, precise. A murmur rippled outward, controlled, restrained, but unmistakable. One of the elder nobles stepped forward, tall, scaled, adorned with symbols of ancient lineage. His gaze flicked over Elias with open disdain. "One act," he said, voice smooth and practiced, "does not define a species." Elias resisted the urge to shift his weight. Lysara did not look at the noble. "No," she agreed calmly, "but it reveals possibility." Another voice joined in, military sharp, "or weakness. Humans have proven expansionist tendencies. Sentiment is not strategy." Elias felt the tension spike. This was not a discussion, it was a test. He glanced toward Lysara instinctively. She met his gaze, not with reassurance, not with instruction, but with permission. "Speak if you choose." Elias took a breath. "I don't represent humanity," he said, his voice carrying farther than he expected. "I barely represent myself." That drew attention. "I didn't save her because she was Velkarin," he continued. "And I didn't do it to prove humans are virtuous. I did it because letting someone die when I could help would have destroyed whatever was left of me after the war." Silence. "You're right," he said, turning slightly toward the elder noble. "One act doesn't define a species, but it does define a person, and sometimes that's enough to change outcomes." A general scoffed softly, "Naive." "Maybe," Elias replied evenly. "But I've watched people die because someone decided they weren't worth the effort. I've watched that thinking turn conflicts into meat grinders." He didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. "You can prepare for war forever," he said, "and all you'll get is war. Or you can acknowledge that sometimes restraint saves more lives than strength." Lysara stepped forward then, her presence reclaiming the room. "This human is not here to soften us," she said. "He is here to remind us that survival without principle is merely delayed collapse." The elder noble's eyes narrowed. "And if his presence destabilizes your rule?" Lysara's gaze was cold steel. "Then my rule deserves to be challenged." That ended the exchange. Later, in the quiet of the eastern gardens, Elias leaned against a stone railing, the faint glow of bioluminescent plants washing over him. His hands were steady again now, but exhaustion had settled deep into his bones. "You could have stopped me," he said without turning. "I could have," Lysara replied, stepping beside him. "You said exactly what needed to be said." He huffed softly. "I made enemies." "Yes, and allies." She considered that, fewer but stronger. Elias finally looked at her. Up close without ceremony she looked tired. Controlled, composed, but carrying a weight he recognized all too well. "You don't regret this," he said. "No," she replied. "Do you?" He thought of his farm, the quiet, the anonymity. Then of the eyes that had watched him speak, some hostile, some thoughtful, some uncertain. "No," he said slowly, "but I'm starting to understand the cost." Lysara's gaze softened, not in weakness but in shared understanding. "Then you are exactly where you need to be," she said. They stood there in silence, two survivors of different wars, bound not by allegiance, but by a choice neither of them had forgotten. The backlash did not come loudly. It came quietly. Elias noticed it first in the way conversation stopped when Lysara entered a room with him at her side, in the way invitations arrived later, phrased more carefully, stripped of warmth, in the sudden increase of security briefings that felt less like protection and more like surveillance. He had not destabilized the court. He had unsettled it. That was worse. "You're becoming a problem," Elias said one evening as they walked through a lesser-used corridor of the citadel. "Not for your enemies, For your allies. Lysara did not slow her pace. They are not allies if their loyalty depends on comfort. That's easy to say when you're the one wearing the crown. She stopped then, turned. The corridor lights caught the gold in her eyes, and for a brief moment the queen was gone, replaced by the commander he remembered from the battlefield, bloodied and furious and refusing to die. You think this is comfortable? She asked quietly. Elias held her gaze. He did not look away. No, he said, I think it's lonely. The silence that followed was not tense, it was exposed. You see too much, Lysara said at last. That's what medics do, he replied. We look at what everyone else avoids. She resumed walking more slowly now. There are factions preparing a formal challenge, she said. Not to my authority, to my judgment. And I'm the centerpiece. Yes. Elias let out a slow breath. So what's the plan? Am I paraded out again? Another speech? Another reminder that I saved your life? No, Lysara said. That would be expected. He glanced at her. That sounds like you already have something worse in mind. Her lips curved faintly. Better, more dangerous. They entered a private chamber overlooking the lower city, vast, layered, alive with motion. Not the polished heart of power, but the living body of the empire. Citizens, workers, families. This, Lysara said, gesturing outward, is who the conservatives claim to protect by preparing for endless war. Elias watched the movement below. And this is who pays for it. Yes. She turned to him then, her expression stripped of ceremony. I need you to speak to them, she said. Not the court, the people. Elias frowned. I'm not Velkurin. No, she agreed. You are an outsider, which means when you speak, it will not sound like imperial messaging. And when the conservatives accuse you of manipulation, they already do. He ran a hand through his hair, a gesture of old frustration. You're asking me to step directly into the crossfire. I am asking you to do what you have always done, Lysara replied. Stand where others won't. He laughed softly without humor. You make it sound noble. I make it sound necessary. Their eyes met, and something shifted, not attraction, not desire, trust. You don't have to do this, she said quietly. I will not command it. Elias studied her, really studied her. The restraint, the discipline, the weight she carried without complaint. You didn't command me on Korevel either, he said. You were unconscious. Her breath caught just slightly. He turned back toward the city. If I do this, it gets worse before it gets better. Yes, and if it fails. She stepped closer, her presence steady, grounding. Then we fail honestly. He nodded once. All right, he said, I'll speak. The address was scheduled for the following day. Elias stood on a raised platform overlooking one of the central civic forums, the space filled with Velkurin citizens from every caste and profession. He wore no ceremonial attire, no insignia, just himself. My name is Elias Rourke, he began. I am human, and I once treated a wounded Velkurin commander because letting her die would have made me someone I didn't want to be. The crowd listened. He spoke of the war, not glorifying it, not condemning it wholesale. He spoke of fear, of exhaustion, of choices made in seconds that echoed for years. I didn't know she would become queen, he said. If I had, it wouldn't have changed anything. Ethics don't work if they're conditional. Some faces hardened, others softened. I'm not here to tell you humans are better, he continued. We're not. We make mistakes. We get things wrong. We hurt people when we're afraid. He paused, but we can choose not to, and so can you. The response was not applause. It was quieter, thoughtful. Later that night, Elias stood alone on a balcony, the city lights stretching endlessly below. You did well, Lysara said behind him. I made things complicated, he replied. Yes, she said, which means they're changing. He turned toward her. You're trusting me with a lot. She met his gaze, unguarded. I trusted you with my life once, she said. This is less. The space between them felt suddenly charged, not with romance but with something heavier. Commitment. They stood there together, knowing the next challenge would not be subtle, and that neither of them was backing away. The challenge came sooner than Elias expected. It did not arrive in the form of protests or threats. It arrived as an invitation, formal, impeccably phrased, and impossible to ignore. A conclave debate, mandatory attendance, public transmission, full court present. "They're forcing a confrontation," Elias said as he read the notice projected in the private chamber Lysara had assigned him. "Yes," Lysara replied. "They believe you are strongest when protected by my presence. They want you isolated. That's optimistic of them." Her gaze sharpened. "They want you to speak without me correcting the narrative." Elias folded his arms. "Then I should probably be honest. That," she said dryly, "is what concerns them most." The conclave hall was older than the citadel itself. Stone seats curved in vast concentric tiers, designed so no voice could dominate by volume alone. Acoustics favored clarity, precision, truth, or at least the appearance of it. Elias stood alone at the center. No guards, no advisors, no queen at his side. Across from him stood Councillor Threxel, one of the most influential conservative figures in the Dominion. Tall, silver-scaled, eyes sharp with political instinct. "You stand here," Threxel began, "because one moment of sentiment has been inflated into a justification for systemic vulnerability." Elias resisted the urge to sigh. "I stand here," he replied evenly, "because I refuse to let someone die." A ripple of restrained reaction moved through the hall. "You humans excel at narrative," Threxel continued. "You frame emotional impulse as moral superiority." "That's interesting," Elias said, "because from where I'm standing this looks like fear framed as pragmatism." Murmurs followed. Threxel's eyes narrowed. "You imply fear motivates our caution." "I imply fear motivates everyone," Elias replied. "Including humans, including you, including me." He paced slowly, not theatrically but deliberately. "I've treated soldiers who begged me to save enemies because they were tired of killing," he said. "I've watched commanders sacrifice lives because doctrine demanded it. Fear wears many uniforms." "And yet you ask us to trust your species," Threxel said. "No," Elias answered. "I ask you to trust choice." That caught attention. "War assumes the worst," Elias continued. "Peace requires believing the worst is not inevitable." He turned, addressing the wider assembly. "You can prepare endlessly for betrayal, and you'll get it because preparation for war creates the conditions for war." Silence settled. "Or," he said quietly, "you can acknowledge that cooperation is a risk worth taking." Threxel stepped forward. "And if humans betray that trust?" Elias met his gaze without flinching. "Then you respond. Not with preemptive annihilation, but with accountability." The debate did not end in victory. Politics never did, but it ended in something else. Pause. Later, in a quiet antechamber, Lysara stood facing the viewport, hands clasped behind her back. "They will not stop," she said. "I didn't expect them to," Elias replied. She turned to him. "You did not defend humans, you defended uncertainty." He nodded. "Certainty is what gets people killed." For the first time since he had arrived, Lysara laughed softly, not mockery, not amusement, but something genuine. "You are dangerous," she said. "Occupational hazard," he replied. She stepped closer, lowering her voice. "You have shifted the discourse. They can no longer dismiss you as emotional anomaly. And that makes me what?" Her golden eyes met his. "A problem they must solve," she said, the moment stretched, not romantic, not soft, but intimate in a way that only shared pressure could create. "You could still walk away," she said quietly. "Return to your farm. Let this become legend rather than burden." Elias considered it, the quiet mornings, the anonymity, the distance from consequence. Then he looked at her, really looked. "No," he said, "not yet." Lysara inclined her head. "Then prepare yourself." "For what?" "For the realization," she said, "that symbols eventually become targets." Elias exhaled slowly. "I've been a target before." She studied him, something unreadable in her expression. "Yes," she said, "and you survived." Outside the chamber, the Dominion continued to turn, unaware that something fundamental had shifted. not because of force, but because one human had refused to let fear be the loudest voice in the room. The first attempt came quietly. Elias noticed it not because of danger but because of absence. The corridor outside his assigned quarters was empty, too empty. No patrol shift change, no ambient movement. The Citadel was never silent like this. Years of battlefield instincts surfaced without asking permission. He stopped, waited. Then the lights dimmed just slightly. Not a power failure, a controlled adjustment. "Lysara," he said into the discreet comm unit at his collar. "Something's wrong." The response was immediate. "Where are you?" "Eastern Residential Wing, 2nd Junction." A pause, short, sharp. "That corridor should be occupied," she said. "Do not proceed." He didn't get the chance to reply. The air shifted. Elias felt it before he saw it, a displacement like pressure folding inward. Two figures emerged from the shadowed archway ahead, movements smooth and coordinated. Court attire, no visible weapons, which meant concealed ones. "I assume you're not here to discuss policy," Elias said evenly. One of them smiled. It did not reach their eyes. "You've caused considerable instability," the taller one said. "Some believe it is irresponsible to allow a human variable this close to imperial influence." "So," Elias replied, "you're here to escort me somewhere unpleasant." "Temporarily," the figure corrected. Elias shifted his stance, not aggressive, not submissive, just ready. Before either of them could move, the corridor flooded with light. Lysara stepped through the far entrance, armor replaced by combat plating, sleek, lethal, unmistakably real. Two Imperial guards flanked her, weapons already trained. The atmosphere snapped taut. "Step away from him," she commanded. The figures hesitated. That was their mistake. "You forget," Lysara continued, her voice cold enough to cut, "that I was a commander long before I was a queen." The taller figure bowed stiffly. "Your Majesty, this was an internal security precaution." "Against my guest," Lysara interrupted. "Against my decision." "Silence, leave," she said. They did. When the corridor was empty again, Lysara turned to Elias. The fury drained from her posture, but not the tension. "Are you hurt?" "No," he replied, "just annoyed." That earned him a breath of incredulous laughter. "Come," she said. "Somewhere private." They entered a secure observation chamber overlooking the inner city. The doors sealed, countermeasures engaged. Only then did Lysara exhale fully. "They crossed a line," she said, "which means they're afraid." Elias leaned against the railing. "That was an abduction attempt." "Yes, and you didn't hesitate." Her eyes met his. "I will not allow them to touch you." The words landed heavier than either of them expected. "Lysara," Elias said carefully, "I didn't come here to be protected." "I know," she replied. "That does not mean I will allow you to be sacrificed." He studied her, the tension beneath the control, the weight of responsibility layered atop old scars. "You're risking internal fracture," he said, "for me." She did not look away. "I am risking it for what you represent. And if I represent the wrong thing, then I will accept the consequences," she said. The silence between them was different now, closer, not romantic, not fragile, aligned. "You should have security assigned," Elias said, "not visible but present." She blinked. "You're advising me on my own protection." "I'm advising someone who refuses to acknowledge she's not invincible," he replied. A faint smile touched her lips. "You're difficult." "I've been told." She stepped closer, not imposing, not retreating. "When this is over," she said quietly, "what will you do?" Elias considered the question, really considered it. "I don't know," he admitted, "but I know I won't be the same person who arrived." "That," she said softly, "is unavoidable." Below them, the city lights pulsed, life continuing, unaware of how close something fundamental had come to fracture. Lysara rested her hands on the railing beside his, not touching, but close enough to feel warmth. "You are no longer just a symbol," she said. "You are a fault line." Elias exhaled. "Then we'd better make sure what breaks in the right direction." She nodded once, and for the first time since Koravel, Elias understood that saving her life had never been the end of the story. It had been the beginning of shared consequence. The aftermath spread faster than the incident itself. By morning, the attempted removal had already been reframed by competing narratives. Officially, it was a procedural misunderstanding. Unofficially, everyone in the upper levels of the Dominion understood what it had been. A line crossed, a response delivered, and a balance disturbed. Elias felt it in the way guards now appeared without seeming to appear, in the way doors opened a fraction of a second faster when Lysara approached, in the way advisors spoke more carefully, choosing words as if each syllable carried weight. "You've accelerated things," Elias said as they walked through a strategy gallery overlooking the inner chambers. "Yes," Lysara replied. "They believed pressure would make you retreat. And instead, they forced me to choose openly." Elias stopped walking. "That choice put you against your own people." Lysara turned to face him, her expression calm but stripped of its usual ceremonial armor. "I have been against my own people before," she said. "Every time I chose reform over tradition." He studied her then not as queen, not as commander, but as someone who had learned the cost of leadership early and paid it repeatedly. "They're preparing a formal motion," she continued. "A vote of confidence, public, irreversible." Elias exhaled slowly. "So this ends one way or another." "Yes," he nodded. "Then we need to control what the ending means." The vote was scheduled for 3 days later. Those days were not spent in panic, but in preparation. Not speeches, those were already expected, but visibility. Lysara walked openly with Elias through civilian sectors, research districts, transit hubs, not staged appearances, not guarded processions. Presence. People noticed. Some recoiled, some stared, some watched with something like cautious hope. "He's just a man," Elias overheard one citizen whisper. "Yes," another replied, "but she walks beside him." On the second night, Elias found Lysara alone in the observation chamber again. The city below was quieter now, lights dimmed to night cycle glow. "You should be resting," he said. "So should you," she replied without turning. He joined her at the railing. "Do you ever wonder," he asked quietly, "what would have happened if I'd walked away that day?" She did not answer immediately. "Yes," she said finally, "often. And I would be dead," she said plainly. "And this empire would be ruled by someone who believes fear is the safest strategy." Elias nodded. "That's a heavy consequence for a single decision." "It is," she agreed. "Which is why I no longer pretend choices are small." She turned to him then, closer than before, not invading, not distant. "When this vote happens," she said, "they will try to reduce you to a story, a convenient myth. And you," he asked, "they will reduce me to a risk." He met her gaze. "What do you want them to see instead?" She did not hesitate. A ruler who chose trust with open eyes. The great assembly was full, every seat occupied, every transmission channel active. This was not merely governance, it was spectacle, decision made visible. Lysara stood at the center dais. Elias stood beside her, no armor, no regalia, just presence. The opposition spoke first, carefully, elegantly. They framed risk as wisdom, caution as survival. They named Elias without naming him, foreign influence, emotional leverage, dangerous precedent. When it was Lysara's turn, she did not begin with policy. She began with history. "I stand here because I lived," she said. "I lived because an enemy chose compassion over advantage." The chamber stilled. "That choice did not weaken me," she continued. "It did not weaken us. It revealed something stronger than fear." She gestured to Elias, not dramatically, simply acknowledging reality. "This human did not come here to save us," she said. "He came because we summoned him, because we remembered." Then she turned to the assembly. "If we vote to reject this path," she said, "do not pretend it is about safety. It is about whether we believe control is more important than principle." The vote was cast. It was close, too close. When the result appeared, a breath was released across the chamber as if the Dominion itself had been holding it. motion denied, confidence retained. Not victory, but survival. Later in the quiet that followed, Elias leaned against a column, exhaustion finally catching up with him. "You won," he said. Lysara shook her head. "We endured." She looked at him, not as queen now, not as commander, as something closer. "You could leave," she said. "No one would stop you." Elias considered the offer, then shook his head. "Not yet." Her expression softened, not relief, not gratitude, understanding. Outside the chamber, the Dominion continued to argue, to resist, to evolve. But something irreversible had happened. Fear had not won. And for the first time, Elias felt the shape of the end approaching, not as an escape, but as a choice yet to be made. The decision did not end the conflict. Elias understood that within hours, messages continued to arrive. Editorials, counterarguments, quiet warnings wrapped in polite language. The Dominion had not fractured, but it had not healed either. Peace, he was learning, was not a destination. It was maintenance. Weeks passed, then months. The intensity faded, replaced by something more dangerous, normalization. Elias became a familiar presence in the Citadel. No longer shocking, no longer novel, just there. A human walking beside the queen of the Velkaran Dominion. Symbols once absorbed lost their sharp edges. And that paradoxically was success. Elias stood once more in the eastern gardens, watching the bioluminescent plants respond to subtle shifts in light. The air was warm, calm, the kind of calm that existed only after storms had chosen not to return yet. "You've been quiet," Lysara said, approaching without ceremony. "I've been thinking about leaving," Elias replied. She did not react immediately. No tension, no flicker of alarm, just attention. "Permanently?" she asked. "For now," he said. "I don't belong to the court, and I don't think I ever should." Lysara nodded slowly. "You were never meant to." They walked together in silence for a while, footsteps unhurried. "The factions will continue," she said. "Progress has slowed, but it has not reversed." "That's more than most people ever manage," Elias replied. They stopped near the garden's edge, overlooking the lower city. It looked different to him now, not alien, not foreign, just inhabited. Lives moving forward in fragile continuity. "You changed the trajectory," Lysara said. "Not through power, through refusal." He smiled faintly. "I just didn't walk away." "That," she said, "is rarer than strength." Elias turned to face her. Up close, without armor, without crown, she looked lighter, not unburdened, but steadier. "I'll return to my farm," he said. "I need that grounding, that silence." "And when the Dominion needs you again?" she asked. He considered it. "Then you'll know where to find me." She studied him for a long moment, then reached out, not to touch, but to offer a small, smooth object resting in her palm. A sigil, simple, unadorned. "Not a rank," she said. "Not an obligation, a reminder." He took it carefully. "Of what?" "That trust is not a weakness," she replied, "and that some debts are never meant to be closed." They stood there, no grand gestures, no promises spoken aloud, just acknowledgement. The departure was quiet, no procession, no announcement. Elias boarded a civilian transport bound for the outer lanes, carrying nothing that marked him as anything other than another traveler. Back on New Terra, the farm greeted him with familiar sounds. The hum of systems, the rhythm of work, the comfort of insignificance. And yet, he was not the same man who had left. Sometimes at night, he would look up at the stars and wonder if Lysara was doing the same. Years passed. The Velkaran Dominion and humanity did not become allies overnight. There were disputes, tensions, moments when old instincts flared dangerously close to conflict. But war did not return. Not because fear disappeared, but because memory remained. In schools, Elias' story was told not as legend but as case study. In ethics seminars, military academies, diplomatic training halls. A moment where someone chose differently. A reminder that empires were shaped not only by rulers, but by individuals who refused to abandon their principles under pressure. One evening, long after the world had settled into routine, Elias found a message waiting in his comm system. Encrypted, Familiar frequency. "Do you remember me, human?" He smiled. Yes, he remembered the wounded commander, the golden eyes, the choice made in smoke and ruin, and the realization that sometimes saving one life was enough to change the direction of many. Elias returned to his work the next morning. The galaxy continued to turn, and somewhere beyond the horizon of ordinary days, two civilizations endured, not because they trusted easily, but because once, long ago, someone had chosen compassion when it mattered most.